Welcome all. This is the formal beginning of the webinar, Why Your Managers Aren't Managing Effectively. Hint, it's not their fault. Thank you very much for joining me today. I'm looking forward to covering this material with you. So our starting point today is really around these two questions. Why are some managers great? You know, they're the managers that do everything right. Their team loves them. They have a great time with them. They have fun doing their work. And yet we find that some managers are horrible. So why is it that some are great and some are horrible? And then there's the related question is that even for the great bosses, how can they focus on getting the right work done? So those are the three things that we would like to cover off in today's webinar. For those of you that have participated in some of the other webinars, you'll see that I do have a couple of similar slides. They're intended to set things up. So I don't say exactly the same thing, so you might find it as a bit of a review. The key point here is that whether managers are effective or not, whether managers are quotation marks good or quotation marks horrible, makes a big difference for organization. Here are two pieces of research that really drew me. This one by Lee Branham. 70% of employees leave a job for reasons related to factors that are directly controllable by their managers. And if you think about it, the manager is the individual with the most influence over each team member's relationship to that organization. They delegate work to them, they give them their performance management, they coach them, and so on. So all of this becomes very, very important context for employees. And if it's a horrible manager, as we see here, in 70% of the cases, people will vote with their feet. In other words, they move on to the next organization. And then this similar finding from Gallup organization, work groups that are ineffectively managed are 50% less productive and 44% less profitable. So it matters both in terms of retaining good employees, and it matters in terms of the company being as profitable as it can be. The other setup slide I wanted before I get into the heart of this is this reinforcement of the importance of leadership and management in the organization. And this goes back to research that was published way back in 1994 by a guy by the name of James Heskett. He published this in Harvard Business Review. He's a professor at Harvard, and he put forward this chain called the service profit chain, that employee satisfaction leads to customer satisfaction, leads to revenue and profit, and very convincing logic and research to support that. But what's often not realized, because this has become so ingrained in people's thinking and reading and management talking, is that the leadership practices, that is the management of an organization, underlies all of this. So employee satisfaction is in fact driven by how managers relate with their subordinates and the whole leadership environment within the organization. So it matters a great deal whether managers are good or not. To explore this question a little bit more, I started a discussion in the HR.com group on LinkedIn, and it's a pretty simple discussion. I asked a question. I said, what is one word to describe your worst manager? I think I might have been a little wordier than that, but that was the thought for the question. And for the worst manager, I've had 134 answers so far. They're still coming in, so it struck a nerve with people. And these are some of the words that came up: ignorant, hypocrite, disrespectful, indifferent, abusive, insecure. The four most common ones I've made the largest on this slide. So they were micromanager, insecure, self-centered, and incompetent. So those are the most common answers that I got, or the most repeated answers in terms of that. So hold that thought. We're going to come back to this in a minute. I wanted to also understand the other perspective. So in a separate discussion group on LinkedIn in the HR.com group, I asked this question: what is one word to describe your best manager? And this is a much happier experience. So you get questions like mentor, fair, leader, humble, genuine, empowering, understanding, trusting, nurturing. And the top ones were the four largest on this slide again. So supportive, 13 people used that word. Leader, 10 people used that word. Inspirational, 15 people used that word. And trustworthy, 6 people used the word trustworthy, but another 5 people used the word trusting. So I kind of added those together for 11 because that's the two ends of a trusting relationship. So if one is trustworthy, one is typically trusting as well of the other partner in that relationship. So I found this very intriguing, and I will be doing more digging into this data because I think it's very interesting to get these one-word perceptions of managers. So then the question becomes, what is the difference? What drives the difference between horrible bosses and great bosses? For the on the horrible boss side, some managers just simply, obviously, by these answers, simply don't have the personality to manage. So when you get words like this, or if you're in a relationship with a manager and you use the word sociopath, abusive, deceitful, duplicitous, evil, these are words that describe such a dysfunctional relationship that I cannot imagine that individual should be a manager. And in fact, if a person is demonstrating those kinds of personality traits, they would, I would expect them not to be successful, not only as a manager, but also in any other kind of a position that they are in. So there are situations where the organization needs to ensure that people are behaving appropriately, and these kinds of situations are absolutely inappropriate behavior and can't be tolerated. And I imagine that these are some of the situations where the employee absolutely on their first opportunity moves. So let's think about this from the perspective of the top 4, because I think that is going to be very helpful in understanding what is the fundamental lack of management requires that drives situations where you have horrible bosses in organizations. So looking at each of these top 4, there are some trends here, and they are quite indicative. I would call them, in fact, symptoms of an underlying cause, and I'll come to the underlying cause in a few slides. So if you're thinking about a micromanager situation, here you have an individual that is looking over the shoulder of their direct reports all the time. What would be driving this? Well, the person may not feel capable of doing the work at the level to which they've been appointed as manager. So for success so far in their career, they've been very successful at doing the work at the level down, and as a result, they find it hard to let go of that work, and therefore enjoy doing that work more. And this is perceived by the person that's supposed to be doing that work now as micromanaging or being in sort of looking over their shoulder all of the time. Insecurity might be related to what I just talked about in terms of people not feeling that they have the capability, the experience, the skill set to work at that next level up. But there are other skills as well that one needs to think about in terms of managing, and it's different for each layer of the organization. So as a manager, you need leadership capabilities, for instance, and these leadership capabilities are different if you're a frontline manager than if you're a director, than if you're a vice president, than if you're a senior vice president or a president or CEO of the organization. So it matters in terms of the skills that an individual has to be able to do that work. Do they? And organizations tend not to think about that very much. They think, well, a manager is a manager, but in fact they're not. So if someone is lacking the skill set to be working at that level, that might come across as insecurity. Self-centered and incompetent, I kind of put together in my mind because the perception of incompetence or the perception of one being self-centered might be driven by similar things. Again, it could be either of the two symptoms I just talked about. The person isn't capable of working at the level they're working at now, or they don't have the experience set that they should have, or they don't have the skills or the technical ability to be able to follow all of those. Or there's even possibly another reason, and that is individuals They don't enjoy the act of managing. So the performance management, the meetings, the coaching, the following up, the interactions with subordinates that are so critically important to managerial work. So there are lots of things that can be driving this perception by subordinates that their managers are micromanaging them, that they are insecure, that they're self-centered, or that they are incompetent. So these things are different from the last slide I showed you because they are organizationally driven. So organizations can do a better job of setting people up for success. So going off to the better side of the coin. So those things that uh, uh, are used to describe great bosses. And these words I loved: approachable, compassionate, transparent, humble, listener. And these are strengths that would apply to any individual in any job and would help them to be successful in almost any job. And when you can get these kinds of personality traits together with a manager, then that's when the magic starts to happen. So let's, in the same way we did with the horrible bosses, for the great bosses, let's look at those top four. So here's some of the strengths of what I would call getting it right in terms of finding the right person for the managerial job. So they're supportive. So they're the great boss is coming from a perspective where they're able to delegate to their subordinates. They're able to set the context for their work. They're able to give them the resources that they need, and then they kind of let them go and do the work. And they say, if you get into trouble, come and see me. If you run into problems, come and see me. Keep me up to date in the work that you're doing, and I will support you in your efforts to get your job done. Leadership I talked about from the other perspective on the horrible bosses side, and it's really important here. There's unfortunate language in a lot of organizations that leadership is at the top of the organization and management is at the bottom of the organization, and leadership is this somehow great state of being that one should aspire to, and managers are doing the drudge work and they're keeping processes going and so on. And that's just wrong thinking. Every manager in an organization that has accountability for managing others, by definition, needs to have leadership skills. If I'm working at the front line and I've got a team and that team needs to perform in the organization, it's incredibly important that they perceive me as the leader and that I have the necessary leadership skills to support them in the work that they need to do. So thinking that leadership is some magical kind of entity or elixir that can be applied at the top of the organization is not helpful. Inspirational, I like very much. So inspirational also, I think is driven largely by that additional level of capability that the individual has. So if I'm a subordinate in the organization and I see my manager, and if I have a problem and I can go to them, if I sit in a meeting and I listen to them talk and I think, oh, that's great, I hadn't thought about it in those terms, they're demonstrating a higher level of capability of thinking about the complexity of the work and their vision of the world and how this department and us working together can make a positive change. So that inspirational element is critically important. And the trustworthy, again, I talked about that from the opposite perspective. Oh no, I guess in a previous slide about trustworthy and trusting being two sides of the same coin. So if the manager relies on the subordinate to do the job, if as the subordinate I know I can go to my manager and get solution or support, then that trusting relationship is built, and in fact that's critically important. In fact, somewhere in the webinars section on my website, I have a section on trusting relationships. So that brings us to what are those fundamental capabilities that are necessary for managers, great managers, to be able to do their work, and I think more importantly for organizations and through support from HR and within systems set by the CEO to ensure that we are appointing individuals to managerial positions who can be great, because that's when the magic happens in organizations, and that's when teams work together, and that's when we're going to be able to execute strategy. So there are three of them. The first one is problem-solving capability. Work increases in complexity, the higher one moves up the organization. So people tend not to think about it that way, but it is kind of a no-brainer. It's work that you do on the front line in terms of proceduralized production or delivery of products and services is more straightforward than a vice president job that might be to put in a new corporate-wide information system or to expand their territory onto another continent or whatever. So what's often not recognized in organizations, though, is that you can assess and measure this complexity, and the individual that is assigned to that role needs to be able to work at that level of complexity. So they need to have the problem-solving capability to move up to that next level of work and be successful at it. What happens in many organizations when there's a vacancy, the best performer on the current team is the one that's promoted to the next level up. And what unfortunately is often the case is that your best performer is best because they have exactly the right level of problem-solving capability for success in the job that they're in now. And if you promote them, you in fact put them in a situation where they can't be successful because they don't have that level of problem-solving capability. The second one is skills and knowledge. And each job is very different in terms of the skills and the knowledge that are necessary for success in that position. I avoid the use competencies because competencies are very difficult to differentiate on levels in an organization. You know, you need leadership, so, you know, what does that mean in real terms? So what one needs to think about is for this particular job at this level in the organization, what are the skills and what are the knowledge that we need, not only in terms of the content of the work that's necessary, but in terms of the managerial and leadership skills that are necessary for success in that job. And then the third one we have is application. So what are the traits that an individual must have to be able to really value the work that they're doing. So I referred to this in an earlier slide, that managers need to value the work of managing. They need to value working through a team and enabling their team and delegating to the team and following up with the team and meeting with the team and coaching and training and giving performance management. Because if the manager does not value those things, you know what happens. It's on the to-do list, and the systems say that they should be doing these things, and they know they should be doing these things, but for whatever reason they never get to it because they just don't value that. They would be rather working at whatever else it is that they really do value. So that's one element that's critically important, is that effective managers need this right balance of capability, knowledge, and skills, and then as well the application to apply themselves fully to all aspects of the work that are necessary for success. And this needs to be understood for each position in the organization, so that when it comes time to appoint someone to a position, you can identify the individual that has the right fit for each one of these dimensions as we move forward. I have a whole webinar in this area. It's on the website under webinars. I put it on a few webinars ago, so it's now posted there, and you can watch it at any time. And I also have a series of articles called "Discovering the X Factor," excuse me, the 3 fundamental capabilities of managers. So if you're interested in digging more into this, there's a lot more material on the web. So please feel free to avail yourselves of that material. So getting the right people in the right jobs is important, but once that is done, the managers have to do the right work. So that's the other dimension. So first, get the right people in the right positions. The second is that they need to do the right managerial work. So there are 5 requirements for effective managers, and similarly, I have an article on the web that you can download free, and I also have I haven't done a webinar on this one yet, but don't worry, I'll put it on the list for coming up. But there are articles on the web, and there's a PDF that you can download for free. So there are 5 things that all managers must do to be successful in their work. So the first one is they need to plan. So as a manager, I need to understand what I'm accountable for. So therefore, I need to understand my manager's plan, and my manager needs to delegate to me. And then in terms of respect of how I manage my people, I need to have a plan for the work that I'm doing for my department, my area, my region, whatever it might be, that area of accountability that the organization has assigned to me. Because that planning differentiates that work that I must focus in on for the company to be successful at implementing its strategy. So the plan, my plan, is a subset of my boss's plan. His or her plan is a subset of their boss's plan, all the way up to the CEO, who's accountable for the strategic plan of the organization. So it's critically important from the perspective of the CEO to recognize that the strategic plan is the CEO's own plan that they must execute, and that in the execution of that, they need to sit down with each one of their vice presidents and work through what they are accountable for, so that in the combination of all of the work that all of them do, they enable the CEO to do their value-added work and then to continue on. Which brings me to the second point, which is do value-added work. There's also, often a misperception of people when they first enter the workforce that, wow, once I'm a manager, I've got it made. I just tell other people what to do. But no, sorry, it doesn't work that way. Each level of work in the organization has a different level of complexity, and there is work at each level that only the people at that level have the capability, the skills, and the knowledge to do successfully. So certainly you need to plan, and you need to delegate, which we'll come to in a minute, but you also need to decide what is that work which only you can do, and figure out when and how you're going to do it, what the timeline is for it, what parts of it you can delegate, which elements that you will be able to gather together from others and integrate. But it's really important for each manager to think about what is that work that I need to do. The third step then is the setting of context and boundaries. So once I've got my plan in place, I understand my job, my boss has told me about their plan and what their expectations are of me. It's now my job to work with my team as a whole, and then with each one of my individual team members to set context for them. So this is your job, this is your job description, this is my plan, let's work on your plan. These are policies which apply in our area, and so on. So again, I won't get into that in detail. You can download the specific details. But this setting of context and boundaries is important, because what it does is it's the manager setting the environment. Here I am, I'm making a big circle with my hands in the air. So it's the manager setting the environment for their employees to have the knowledge that they need to be able to make decisions and take initiatives within their own authority, so they can just go ahead and do that work. This is what I would call real empowerment. So they are empowered to make decisions and to start initiatives that are within the context of their managers, so that the combination of all of these initiatives and all of these decisions throughout the entire organization are in fact linked back to the strategic plan of the organization. So everybody is pulling in the same direction. So you get this wonderful network of context and delegation that starts at the top of the organization, almost like a big umbrella or a shower, sort of a waterfall. Starts at the top of the organization, and then it cascades down in ever decreasing levels of complexity, so that it's all tied together and all linked together. At that point, and only then, is the manager able to delegate. So within context, understanding what their value-added work is, understanding how their plan links back to the strategy, they can delegate specific tasks to their subordinates. There are 4 dimensions that are important. I call that QQTR, and again, they're in the paper on the web: quality, quantity, timeliness, as constrained by resources. That comes from Elliot Jack's work. And then the last one is establish feedback loops. So these are critically important. There's a feedback loop between the manager and the team, a feedback loop between the manager and each subordinate, a feedback loop between the manager and peers across the organization, and then whatever appropriate feedback loops there might be into the community or stakeholder groups. So all of those need to be in place. So I see my time is moving on. So the next slide is just a series of the model that I have for the 5 requirements of a manager, and this is in the PDF that you can download. But it does show how each of these elements relate with each other in terms of planning, doing, setting context and boundaries, delegating, and establishing feedback loops. And if it looks complex, sorry folks, it is complex. So managing is not easy. Managing is worth every penny that managers earn. That is in addition to the compensation at the level below. Now, for those of you, I did send a PDF of the slides out to everyone yesterday. As I went through these this morning, I decided to add 3 bonus slides. So if you'd like to receive these, let me know, and I'll send you the full revised PDF. But I wanted to close the loop in terms of the research that we have in this, so that even if you have managers that are great managers, they have all the traits, they're well matched to the job, they understand what they need to do as a manager, there can be still an issue in terms of getting the right work done. And the research that we did with the University of Ottawa showed that, in fact, managers are only spending 55% of their time in doing what they would call value-added work. So almost half of their time is spent doing things that they see as something that's extraneous to their job, stuff that is getting in the way, in fact, of them doing their value-added work. So in organizations, unless we have the right systems in place to support managers in focusing on their value-added work, CEOs are running with kind of the gas pedal halfway down because they're wasting almost half of the capability of their managers to focus in on this value-added work. And the research shows that the key missing factor is this. It's this clarity of accountability in the organization. And there are 2 dimensions to accountability. One is felt accountability. The other one is clarity of accountability. Felt accountability is high, so people want to do well. People feel that they're accountable for quotation mark stuff, whatever that stuff is. But where we're failing our managers is we're not being clear with them in terms of what specifically they are accountable for in terms of doing their value-added work. So this clarity of accountability is critically important because it drives clarity of action. So what am I accountable for doing? What shall I do? And this clarity of interaction, because if I'm working with peers across the organization and neither of us is particularly clear about what we're accountable for, there's going to be conflict in the organization. So this clarity of accountability and having accountability and authority frameworks that flow down across the organization and flow across the organization can have tremendous payback to organizations. So this is a summary on those last 2 slides I had, so that there's this very strong correlation between felt accountability and clarity of accountability. And whether or not clear accountabilities are set, managers are going to take on or feel accountable for doing things. The research is very clear about that. So the question in organizations isn't whether or not managers will feel accountable. They are going to feel accountable. The actual question is whether they're going to be feeling accountable for the right things. And that is the job of the CEO, to ensure that there's a framework in place to ensure that that happens. So down to our last couple of minutes. In summary, there are a lot of bad managers out there. There's no question about that. And in fact, I think the perception of bad managers is worse than the actuality of bad managers. So because of these organizational problems that we have getting the right people into the right position, we may well have well-intentioned, well-meaning individuals in managerial positions that are perceived as incompetent, that are perceived as self-centered, that are perceived as micromanaging, because they don't have the capability or the skills or the knowledge to be effective at the managerial work at the level to which they've been appointed. So we as managers who have an accountability for appointing our own managers who report directly to us need to be aware of these aspects, as much so as the CEO, who should be accountable for ensuring the system in place, and the head of HR, who should be recommending these systems and monitoring their use in the organization. So in my experience as a manager and as a management consultant, organizations generally don't do a good job of identifying these requirements for each job in the organization. And in general, I don't think managers have a good appreciation of the managerial work that needs to be done in terms of those 5 factors that we had in place. So don't miss out on these upcoming webinars. At the end of this month, we have Building Organizational Trust. Later on in September, we have Are Leaders and Managers Different? It's a moot point, and there I'll really dive into some of the issues that I've given you earlier. So please do feel free to answer any questions. I'd very much ask me any questions you have. I'd be very pleased if you would fill out that survey form and help me to continue improving these events. And if you would like to register for my monthly newsletter, please do log on to effectivemanagers.com where you can do that, or follow me on Twitter. I would love to give you some updates. Sorry for going a couple of minutes over, and I do appreciate your time today. Thank you very much. Bye.
Hi, I'm Dwight Maholitz, President of Effective Managers. Thank you so much for downloading the webinar. I hope that you enjoyed it and will find it useful. Feel free to check out other parts of the website for interesting downloads. Most are free, some are at a nominal charge, but I'm sure you'll find lots of interesting tools there and things that can help you be more effective. And in fact, that's what my job is. My job is to help you, help your organization be higher performing. The bottom line is that I want to start where you are, understand your problem, and provide services that can help you solve that problem and implement a solution as quickly and as effectively and as efficiently as possible. Give me a call, drop me an email. I'd love to hear from you, talk about your situation, and see if there's anything that we can do together. Thank you.